Now we want to turn to our first build along of this evening. We have three. This one is Hangman Creek's Dioramas. Owner is Jeff Dozier, and Jeff is going to build it for us tonight. So Jeff, thank you so much for being here. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you. You guys hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen, and really, I'm actually out of town for the holidays, but it actually works out well because you've got to review instructions and kind of go through that initial process when you're building a kit anyway. So I'll kind of go over those initial steps today. And so let me share my screen and get my instruction manual up real quick. One thing I try to do with my instruction, I could talk about this in the intro, is instructions for me are really critical. I struggle with just in writing instructions, and I even struggle with plans. I'm just not a terribly two-dimensional person. I'm very visual, so I like pictures. So when I developed the kit line, one thing I really wanted to do was to have really, really good instructions, because that's the only way I can model. So again, pretty straightforward. Table of contents, and anybody who builds kits, you should always read the instructions over and over and really get familiar, because it avoids mistakes, and we all make them. All right, so preface, we'll skip all this stuff. I get a little overview of the company, and my modeling philosophy is just to really try to make do everything, even the small stuff, do it to the highest detail possible, because in the end, that's what's going to add up to make a really, really cool model, right? What's in the box? It's really just an inventory. I use these to make sure that I don't mess up when I ship stuff, right? So what's included in the kit: resin castings, hydrocal castings, and I include the scenery. Now, the reason I did this is I wanted to be a little bit different, but what's really critical for me as well is I like things to get done. And if I don't have all the stuff I need at that time, I have a tendency not to finish things. So I thought, if I'm going to do a kit, I'm going to make sure I have everything you need to finish it. Okay. So in this kit, actually, I even included the base. My future offers, I haven't done that because they've gotten bigger and more complex, but this one even has the base. So again, nothing real complicated here, but you avoid having to buy bulk of everything if you go this route too. All right, so again, quick inventory. So these, I've got some castings from Keith Wiseman. He owns the McKinsey line. He purchased that, and he's got this neat little Buddha motor kit. So it's got a few different things in it, but let's get down to the basic stuff. First thing you got to do is basically, this is Home Depot special. It's just a 12-inch by 12-inch, quarter-inch piece of plywood that I supply, and just some slats. And basically just glue a box together. Use a couple clamps, some 3-2-1 blocks. Anybody who's ever used 3-2-1 blocks, they are your friend. They are the handiest thing ever. They keep things square and straight. And then I just sprayed it with some, sealed it, because it's going to have, eventually, it's going to be the base. So I want to get paint on it now, even if I have to go back and touch it up later. So nothing strange here. I just, you basically build in a box. Now, this is where you got to invest a little bit of time, right? So resin is unique in that it really, you can do a lot with it. I like to build in my resin patterns. I do all the pre-distressing already. So if it is like the boat is metal, whereas the boat deck and the outhouse are wood, the dock is wood, but I actually grain all my patterns in, so you don't have to go, it's already got the knots in there, it's already got the nail holes and stuff like that. And resin replicates things amazingly in fine detail when you use an RTV mold. You see in this too, there's trestle bents, there's stringers, there's some caps, there's tires. So I prime all the resin castings. I just use very inexpensive automotive primer. You get it at Home Depot. Again, light feather coats. And what's really critical with resin castings is to always, most manufacturers, I'm one of them, we use mold release. That protects the life of our molds. It also helps with detail. But you always want to wash your castings, warm water. Comet, it's a Tom York trick. Use a little bit of Comet on them with a sponge and just brush them down. It gets that mold release off, but it also gives the resin some tooth, and the paint will stick to it better. If you have any mold release on something that's left and you try to paint it, it may stick, but eventually, if you brush it wrong, it's going to come off. So resin castings, clean up the flash lightly. I try not to give too much flash, and just warm soapy bath. Again, a little bit of Comet works really, really well. And this is a critical stage, because you do this right, and then a lot of other things are going to go well down the road. White metal and brass pieces, I pre-blacken everything. And a trick that I found out about was if you actually take white metal and you dunk it and give it a nice rinse in 99% isopropyl alcohol, which you can get at a drugstore for like $1, well, a little more than that now, then when you blacken the white metal, it won't get those funky little white spots that sometimes you get when you blacken white metal. Sometimes there's these little areas that won't quite, the acid won't quite attack them. Now I use, blacken it is really what everybody uses, but it's actually expensive per ounce. Whereas, I go through a lot of stuff. I buy Rio Grande models straight through the internet, and literally like this jar has lasted me, this big old tub has lasted me like 12 years. Like it, and it's really strong. So it instantly works, where blacken it is a little bit diluted. Now, what's great about that is that, natural metal, when you blacken it, gives it a great surface for paint to adhere to, but it also, with a little bit of buffing, it looks pretty natural and really good on its own. All right, strip wood. There's so many different ways to do strip wood. It's insane, right? So I try to mix it up a little bit. I use everything from cheap Minwax primers to wash down gray paints. Again, I go back and I pre-grain my strip wood just with a welder. This is a welder's or a file cleaning brush. It's got a really stiff, short bristle. It works fantastic, and you can get a lot of grain in. You can use an X-Acto knife. And then I just bought some real cheap leather punches. Leather punches are fantastic in that you can actually just drive them in and make a little knot detail if you want, and then that'll show up when you color it. So again, I pre-prep everything because I like when I put stuff together. It also, if you make an error, like once you glue something, it doesn't stain well, it doesn't paint well, right? If you have a little bit of overflow with paint or anything like that. So I like to get a good base, and I weather things pretty old and aged. So I try to get a nice, that aged gray look. You can use something even as simple as silverwood, or even a little alcohol India ink wash. There's so many methods, but I have a tendency to try to do a little variation. So, right, I'll use a little Minwax stain, I'll use a little gray paint diluted, but I'll try to make sure I have a lot of variation in any boards I do or anything else, okay? And distress things pretty well. So it shows that character when you're all done. So another strip wood method is to basically have washes, right? Burnt umber, raw sienna, and to lightly wash the wood. It yields very realistic results because it'll give that variation. But again, you're not painting, you're doing light washes. You're just trying to leave a little residue behind. Layers, 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 right? That, and then once that dries and it's still even a little bit tacky, if you hit it with a little alcohol India ink mixture, or even sprinkle a little bit of chalk on it and brush that in, you'll get really, really good results without having to overthink it. And actually, the more random you are and the quicker you are, the less you think, the better it generally comes out, right? I'm impatient, so I like things that actually go pretty fast. Hydrocal. I love Hydrocal, right? Nothing replicates stone or concrete better than Hydrocal. In this case, Hydrocal castings come with the kit. I lightly wash them. This is, again, really a Tom York method that I picked up years ago. I can't say this is original because it's not, but it really works well. Just diluted craft paint and layers of wash, and to carve in a little bit of cracks. Those are already built into the casting. A little burnt umber on the bottom, to simulate kind of how water rises and falls. You can even paint a little moss if you want. But again, real easy to have a lot of character, and everything gets finished with alcohol and India ink. So again, here's that layers. This is some AK Interactive moss and moss deposit. I love this stuff. I'm addicted to moss because the stuff's so cool, right? It just gives variations, and it's for something really simple. It shows like, hey, wow, you did a little extra, right? And wherever there is, shade and water, and, I'm kind of modeling the Northwest, there's going to be moss. So try to get that in areas where it would settle. But again, this literally was done in under 20 minutes. I mean, I do wet on wet, because I'm impatient and just really like to knock it out quick. So then this also comes with, this is the other bridge abutment. And again, just in this case, there's a couple different ways to do it. I used a Minwax wash on this, but I also use, again, just raw umber, raw sienna, typical acrylics, just like you would if you're painting scenery. Try to get that aged wood look, and then What's good about washes and even a little bit of chalk at the end is that they won't leave a shine, right? Because that's what you want. You don't want shine when you're doing any kind of scenery work. So, and, you know, again, the trestle bents. So I go back on these resin trestle bents and I'm just trying to give them that base wooden wash. You know, this is all part of that prep stage. So really you're going to go from, okay, I got a base prep. I've got all my components, a light wash. I got my strip wood done. I got my, you know, my white metal colored. And then really the fun part is once that's all done, then it's just really about going back and starting to put some stuff together and then adding, you know, that next level of layers of detail to really make things come alive. So this is the really, you know, early step, right? The next, on the next show, I've only got a couple minutes left, but the next show I'll go over how the logboat is done because it's really simple, but it really comes out pretty cool in the end. It looks basically as real as you can make it look, but without really having to have any artistic skill at all, right? Which I like because, you know, I don't want to pretend I'm Picasso. I'm not. I like to do things quick, and the logboat's pretty fun. So again, you know, just really going to work through the next steps. We're going to be working through some base assembly, but really the first steps are all about prep the castings and, you know, just get them aged, you know, get them cleaned up, get them primed. And I always let things prime and cure at least a day. I'm impatient, but I'm not that impatient. You really want to let primer cure because when primer cures, it gets a nice tooth to it that the other next layers of weathering and chalk and all that have something to adhere to. If you don't let it cure, then once things go sideways and if it doesn't adhere well to the resin especially, it's really tough to fix, right? Then it doesn't generally come out all that great. So really pretty straightforward. When I'm on the bench, the next show, I'll really go into, I'll have the materials prepped. We'll start to go into some base assembly, much more easier to see that part. And, you know, we'll just go from there. But again, really the first step, go through the instructions pretty heavily. And I mean, go front to back, right? If you go through the instructions on visual, it is step by step, you know, piece by piece. So I think that's a good enough start. And I think I used about 13 minutes, Jim. So I better shut up.
Well, before you do, Jess, I think it's going to be a gorgeous diorama. And, you know, providing all of the materials to build it, I think is a wonderful idea because it does save you from having to buy bulk, you know, certain things that you don't need that much of for this particular diorama. So I think that was a great decision. Does anybody have any questions for Jess so far? Jess, thank you so very much. We look forward to seeing you. You have a safe trip home.
All right. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep, you too.